I am Collins Flynn, 40 years old, and I hold secrets that could topple foreign governments, but in the eyes of my aunt, I am nothing but a failure. That Thanksgiving dinner was supposed to be warm, a rare ceasefire in the silent war of my family dynamics. Instead, it turned into hell the moment Aunt Marjorie raised her glass of expensive wine, pointed a manicured finger at my cousin, her golden boy, and then looked at me with pity. "Look at your cousin, Collins. That is a hero," she said, her voice dripping with a toxic sweetness. "And you? 18 years in the service and not a single medal to hang on the wall? It's honestly embarrassing how you cling to the government's skirt just to stamp papers." She laughed, a cruel tinkling sound that tore through my self-esteem right in front of the entire family. But she didn't know that the man sitting next to her, the Navy SEAL son she worshipped, had just dropped his silver fork onto the table when he heard me whisper two forbidden words under my breath. Two words that would make her wish she had never opened her mouth. If you have ever been looked down upon by your own flesh and blood for your silent sacrifices, leave a comment and subscribe right now. Because this story is for you. My 2012 Ford Taurus gave a final, wheezing shudder as I killed the engine in the driveway. It sat there, a gray, dust-streaked blemish parked amidst a sea of pristine German engineering. To my left was a sleek Mercedes SUV. To my right, a BMW convertible that probably cost more than my entire education. This was Arlington, Virginia, where status wasn't just implied, it was the very oxygen people breathed. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My knuckles were white. I wasn't preparing for a tactical extraction in a hostile zone, but God knows, walking into Aunt Marjorie's house felt dangerously similar. I checked the rearview mirror. My face was tired. Not the I stayed up late watching Netflix kind of tired, but the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from 3 days of managing a crisis in the South China Sea from a windowless bunker. I smoothed down my suit. It was a standard-issue gray pantsuit, practical, nondescript, and utterly devoid of style. I stepped out into the crisp November air, the smell of wood smoke and fallen leaves hitting me. Before I could even reach the doorbell, the massive oak door swung open. "Oh, Collins," Aunt Marjorie sighed, framing herself in the doorway like she was posing for a lifestyle magazine cover. She was 65 but fighting it tooth and nail with Botox and a wardrobe that cost a fortune. "You're still wearing that gloomy gray thing on a holiday?" She stepped aside, ushering me into the foyer which smelled overwhelmingly of potpourri and expensive perfume. "Look at Nathan," she gushed, gesturing dramatically toward the living room. My cousin Nathan stood by the fireplace, holding a tumbler of scotch. He was 35, tall, broad-shouldered, and looking like a recruitment poster in his navy dress blues. The gold buttons on his jacket caught the light from the crystal chandelier. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight. But to Marjorie, he was a statue of perfection. "Doesn't he look like a god?" Marjorie whispered loudly in my ear as she pulled me into a hug that felt more like a frisk search. Her eyes traveled down my body, landing critically on my shoes. They were sensible black pumps, the heels worn down from pacing situation rooms, the leather scuffed from kicking open a stuck door in a safe house last week. Marjorie's lip curled just a fraction of a millimeter. "We really must take you shopping, dear. You look like you work at the DMV." "Happy Thanksgiving, Aunt Marjorie," I said, my voice flat, practiced. I accepted the insult like I accepted incoming intel. Store it, analyze it, don't react. The dining room was a masterpiece of suburban theater. The table was set with fine china, silver cutlery that gleamed aggressively, and a centerpiece of autumn flowers that probably cost more than my car payment. "Sit, sit," Marjorie commanded. She placed Nathan at the head of the table, naturally. I was seated on the side, squeezed between a decorative vase and the drafty window. My mother sat opposite me, her eyes fixed on her empty plate, already shrinking into herself. The turkey was brought out, a golden brown 20-pound bird that looked like it had been styled by a food coordinator. Marjorie picked up the carving knife, but let Nathan take over. "A warrior needs to carve the meat," she announced, beaming. As the platters were passed around, the discrimination became a silent comedy. Marjorie heaped thick, juicy slices of white meat onto Nathan's plate, followed by a mountain of stuffing and cranberry sauce. "You need your strength, baby," she cooed. "After everything you've done for this country, fighting in the desert, protecting us." When the platter reached me, it was mostly picked over. Marjorie reached across, grabbed the serving spoon, and dropped a single dry wing and a scoop of lukewarm green bean casserole onto my china. "Eat up, Collins," she said, her voice dropping to that patronizing register she used for children and service staff. "Although, be careful with the carbs. When you sit in an office chair for 12 hours a day, the weight just sticks to you, doesn't it? You don't burn calories like Nathan does. He's out there in the field." I looked at the dry turkey wing. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 36 hours. The irony was rich. While Nathan was indeed a SEAL and a damn good one, his last deployment had been a training rotation in Germany. My office chair had recently been inside a dusty Humvee coordinating drone strikes. "The food looks delicious, Aunt Marjorie," I said. It was the lie that kept the peace. She took a long sip of her Napa Valley Cabernet, leaving a lipstick stain on the rim of the crystal. "You know," she started, and I felt the muscles in my neck tighten. The preamble always signaled an attack. "I heard on Fox News that the Pentagon is looking to cut administrative staff. Are you worried, honey?" I cut a piece of the dry meat, chewing slowly. "My department is stable, thank you." "Oh, stable," she mocked gently. "That's code for boring, isn't it? Look, if you get laid off, I'm sure Nathan could pull some strings. Nathan, couldn't you get her a job at the base? Maybe answering phones or processing payroll. At least then she'd be near real soldiers. It might rub off on her." The table went quiet. The sound of silverware scraping against china seemed amplified. Nathan stopped chewing. He looked at his mother, then at me. There was a flicker of embarrassment in his eyes. He knew I outranked him. He didn't know exactly what I did. Intel is compartmentalized for a reason. But he knew that lieutenant colonel wasn't a rank you got for answering phones. "Mom," Nathan said, his voice low. "Collins is doing fine. Let's not talk shop." "I'm just trying to help." Marjorie threw her hands up, the diamonds on her fingers flashing. "I worry about her. It's not natural for a woman her age to be so unaccomplished." My mother made a small noise like a whimpering dog, but she didn't look up. She kept cutting her green beans into tiny, microscopic pieces, terrified of drawing fire. Marjorie wasn't done. The wine had loosened her filter, and her need to elevate her son required a stepping stone. I was that stone. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing with malicious delight. "Let's be honest, Collins. We're family. We can say these things. It's been 18 years. 18 years in the Army." She pointed with her fork at Nathan's chest, where a rack of colorful ribbons sat proudly on his blue uniform. "Look at Nathan. He's a Christmas tree of valor. And you?" She gestured to my plain gray blazer. Not a single ribbon, not a single medal to hang on the wall. Nothing. I placed my knife and fork down. I aligned them perfectly parallel on the plate. It was a grounding technique. Order in chaos. "Awards in my line of work aren't usually public, Aunt Marjorie," I said softly. "Excuses," she scoffed. "If you do something brave, they pin a medal on you. That's how it works. If you don't have medals, it's because you haven't done anything. Is that it? Is your job just making coffee for the generals? Is that why you never talk about it?" She laughed again, looking around the table for validation. "Don't be ashamed, Collins. Truly. The world needs people to file paperwork. Not everyone has the stomach for danger. Some people just need a safe little hole to hide in while the real men do the work." The air in the room seemed to vanish. I looked at my mother, begging silently for her to say something. Say I'm smart. Say I'm hardworking. Say anything. But she just took a sip of water, her hand trembling. I was alone. I looked away from my mother and fixed my gaze on the centerpiece of the table. A single tall white candle burned in the middle of the autumn arrangement. The flame flickered, dancing in the draft from the window. It was mesmerizing. It was hypnotic. And suddenly, I wasn't in a dining room in Arlington anymore. The smell of roast turkey vanished, replaced by the scent of damp earth and freshly cut grass. the white tablecloth faded into the pristine white marble of a headstone. The flickering candle wasn't a decoration. It was the eternal flame of memory. The insult about hiding from danger echoed in my ears, but it swirled together with a voice from the past, dragging me backward, down into the deep, dark well of memory where the real scars began. The flame of the candle blurred, pulling me back to a gray, drizzly morning in Arlington National Cemetery 28 years ago. I was 12. The world felt too big, too cold, and entirely too empty without my father. The grass was impossibly green, contrasting sharply with the rows of white marble headstones that stretched out like silent soldiers standing at eternal attention. My father's funeral wasn't a grand affair. He was a quiet man in life, and he remained a quiet man in death. There were no news cameras, no crowds of weeping admirers. Just a small group of men in trench coats who stood at a respectful distance, their faces hard and unreadable, and the honor guard performing the flag presentation. I watched, mesmerized and heartbroken, as the soldiers folded the American flag. 13 folds, precise, sharp, meaningful. Each fold a tribute to a life given in service. When the officer knelt in front of my mother and presented the tight blue triangle with the white stars facing up, he whispered the words I would memorize forever. On behalf of the President of the United States Army, and a grateful nation. My mother took the flag, her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped it. I wanted to reach out, to touch the coarse fabric, to feel the last physical piece of my father. But then Marjorie's voice cut through the solemn silence like a serrated knife. She was standing right behind us, dressed in a black coat that looked more appropriate for a fashion runway than a burial. She leaned toward my mother, not to offer a tissue or a hug, but to whisper something that would burn a hole in my heart. "See, Sarah," Marjorie hissed, her breath smelling of mince and judgment. "This is the price of stubbornness. If he had just listened to me and gone into commercial real estate, he'd still be here. He'd be closing deals in D.C., not rotting in a wooden box for a pension that won't even cover your rent." I froze. The tears drying on my cheeks turned cold. At 12 years old, I didn't have the words to fight back, but I felt the acid of her words eating through me. To Marjorie, my father wasn't a patriot who died protecting assets in Eastern Europe. He was a bad investment. He was a failure because he didn't leave behind a portfolio of strip malls and duplexes. That moment defined the rest of my life. It drew a line in the sand. On one side was Marjorie's world, loud, shiny, and hollow. On the other was my father's world, silent, dangerous, and honorable. I chose my side right then and there. As I grew up, the divide only deepened. While Nathan was being groomed to be the golden child, I became the ghost. I remember my 10th birthday. It was a Tuesday. I had woken up with that specific, bubbly excitement that only a child feels, waiting for the balloons, the cake, the happy birthday song. I waited all morning, then all afternoon. By dinner time, the silence was deafening. Mom was rushing around the kitchen, but not for me. Marjorie and Nathan had come over. "Did you hear?" Marjorie announced, bursting through the door, her voice booming. "Nathan won the regional swim meet, first place in the freestyle, my little Olympian." Nathan, dripping wet hair and holding a cheap plastic trophy, beamed. Mom clapped, her face lighting up in a way it never did for me. "Oh, that's wonderful. We have to celebrate. Let's order pizza." I sat on the stairs, hugging my knees. My 10th birthday, double digits, and it had been completely erased by a swimming trophy. I didn't say a word. I just went back to my room, pulled out my math homework, and worked until my eyes blurred. If they weren't going to love me, I decided I would make sure they couldn't ignore me. I would be undeniable. By high school, I was undeniable. But not in the way Marjorie valued. When I was accepted into West Point, the United States Military Academy, it was one of the proudest moments of my life. I had worked myself to the bone. I was the valedictorian of my class. I placed the acceptance letter on the kitchen counter, waiting for someone to notice. Marjorie saw it first. She picked it up with 2 fingers, as if it were a dirty napkin. "West Point," she sniffed, tossing it back down. "Good Lord, Collins. Why would a girl want to go there? Short hair, marching in the mud, no social life. It's so dry. She turned away, dismissing 4 years of my hard work in 4 seconds. Look at Nathan, she said, pointing out the window to where my cousin was throwing a football in the yard. He's captain of the varsity team. He's going to UVA. He'll be pledging a fraternity, making connections, living the life. That is a future. That is success. She was right about one thing. Nathan was loud. He was the star of Friday Night Lights. The whole town knew his name. No one knew mine. I was the girl in the library. I was the girl running track alone at 5 a.m. before school. I chose intelligence for the same reason I chose West Point. I wanted to be like the men in the trench coats at my father's funeral. I wanted to be effective, not famous. I wanted to protect the country from the shadows. But in this family, if you weren't on a billboard, you didn't exist. If your achievements couldn't be toasted with champagne at a country club gala, they weren't real. For 20 years, I had swallowed that pill. I let them think I was a glorified secretary. I let them think I filed papers and fetched coffee. It was safer that way. The nature of my job demanded silence. My security clearance demanded anonymity. But God, it hurt. It hurt to sit there, year after year, and be treated like the family charity case while I was authorizing operations that kept them safe enough to sleep at night. If you've ever felt like the black sheep because you chose a path your family didn't understand, hit that like button right now. And tell me in the comments, I chose my own path. Let's show the world that success doesn't always need an audience. Clink! The sharp sound of silverware hitting porcelain snapped me back to the present. The cemetery vanished. The ghost of my father faded. I was back in the suffocating warmth of Marjorie's dining room, the smell of roasted turkey heavy in the air. Marjorie was beaming, her face flushed with wine. She was in the middle of a story, another Nathan story. And can you believe it? She gushed, clutching Nathan's arm. One of his old Navy buddies, who is now a VP at Lockheed Martin, by the way, got him VIP tickets to the Super Bowl. Box seats. Can you imagine? She looked around the table, soaking in the admiration that no one was actually giving, except maybe my cowering mother. Then her eyes landed on me. The warmth in them instantly evaporated, replaced by that familiar, pitying sneer. And what about you, Collins? She asked, her voice dripping with faux concern. What are you doing for the holidays? Another shift at the office? I tightened my grip on my fork. I'm on call, Aunt Marjorie. The world doesn't stop for football. She laughed, a short, sharp bark. On call? Oh, honey, please. What is it this time? Checking to see who forgot to turn off the lights in the copy room? Or maybe making sure the generals have enough paper clips for Monday morning. She leaned in, whispering conspiratorially to the table. Someone has to do the boring work so the real heroes can enjoy the game, right? I looked at Nathan. He was staring at his plate, tracing the rim of his wine glass. He knew. Deep down, he had to know that this was wrong. But he said nothing. He let his mother strip me down, piece by piece, just to build him up. The anger I had buried for 20 years stirred in my chest. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of a teenager anymore. It was cold. It was calculating. It was the anger of Oracle 9. Actually, I said, my voice steady, cutting through her laughter. It's a bit more complex than paper clips. Marjorie waved her hand dismissively. Oh, I'm sure it is to you, dear. I'm sure filing feels very important when it's all you have. She didn't see the predator in my eyes. She only saw the prey she had been hunting since I was 12. She didn't know that the game was about to change. She didn't know that the secretary, sitting across from her, had the authority to turn her world upside down with a single phone call. But she was about to find out, and this time, there would be no silence. Collins, you look terribly pale, dear, Marjorie said, squinting at me over the rim of her wine glass. Do you even see the sun? Or are you trapped in that basement office all day? She reached out and patted my shoulder, my left shoulder. I didn't flinch. I had been trained not to. But under the thin fabric of my gray blouse, beneath the layers of scar tissue, my nerves fired a warning shot. Marjorie's perfectly manicured fingers were tapping directly over a jagged 3-inch scar. a souvenir from a mortar round in Syria 2 years ago. She saw a pale, office-bound spinster. She didn't see the memory that was etched into my skin. Aleppo, 2012. The heat was suffocating, smelling of dust and cordite. I wasn't wearing a blazer then. I was in full kit, body armor heavy on my chest, sweat stinging my eyes. I was sitting across from a tribal leader, a man who held the lives of 40 schoolgirls in his hands. The negotiation was delicate. One wrong word, one wrong look, and the intel on the safe house would vanish. Then the first mortar hit. The ceiling collapsed. I took a piece of shrapnel to the shoulder while shielding the interpreter. I didn't leave. I wrapped it with a field dressing, gritted my teeth, and finished the negotiation. We got the girls out. I get enough sun, Aunt Marjorie, I said, my voice calm, pushing the memory back down. Just been a busy week. Busy doing what? She laughed lightly. Updating spreadsheets? If only she knew. She thought my dark circles were from binge-watching TV or sleeping in on weekends. She had no idea that for the last 36 hours, I hadn't seen a bed. I had been locked inside a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility, deep within the bowels of the Pentagon. It was a windowless, soundproof box kept at a constant 60 degrees to keep the servers and the analysts awake. The air smelled of stale coffee and ozone. For a day and a half, I had been the lead targeting officer for a joint special operations task force. We were tracking a shipment of illegal surface-to-air missiles moving across a border in North Africa. I had watched the live feed from a Reaper drone hovering at 20,000 feet. I had made the calls. I had given the green light. The stress was a physical weight pressing down on your chest until you forgot to breathe. When the mission was over, when the threat was neutralized and the assets were safe, I hadn't celebrated. I had simply driven home, showered for 10 minutes, changed into this suit, and driven straight to this dining room to be told I looked lazy. Something like that, I replied, taking a sip of water. The ice clinked against the glass. Across the table, Nathan was watching me. He wasn't eating. His fork was resting on his plate, and his eyes, sharp, blue, trained, were locked on my face. He was a SEAL. He knew how to read people. He knew what exhaustion looked like, the kind that comes from adrenaline dumps and sleep deprivation, not boredom. More importantly, he noticed what I was doing. Without thinking, my eyes had scanned the room again. I checked the main entrance. I checked the sliding glass doors to the patio. I noted that the heavy drapes were open, a sniper risk, technically, though in suburban Virginia, it was just a privacy issue. I checked the position of the knives on the table. It was automatic. Situational awareness. You don't turn it off just because you're eating cranberry sauce. Collins, Nathan said, his voice cutting through his mother's chatter about her new Pilates instructor. You okay? I met his gaze. For a second, just a second, there was a silent communication between us, warrior to warrior. I'm fine, Nathan, I said. You look wired, he said, choosing his word carefully. Like you're expecting the door to get kicked in. My heart skipped a beat. He was getting too close. I forced a small, self-deprecating smile. The mask slipped back into place. Just too much coffee, probably. The new machine at the office is aggressive. Nathan frowned, not buying it. He opened his mouth to ask something else, something probing. But Marjorie, sensing the spotlight shifting away from her son, intervened. Oh, for heaven's sake, Nathan, she scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. She's not wired. She's just stressed. You know how it is with these administrative types. The copier probably jammed again. Or maybe the colonel didn't like how she brewed his morning roast. She turned to the table, her eyes gleaming with amusement. Can you imagine being stressed about paper clips while my son is out there jumping out of helicopters? She threw her head back and laughed. It was a loud, brash sound, like fingernails dragging down a chalkboard. It filled the room, bouncing off the crystal chandelier and the expensive wallpaper. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated ignorance. I mean, really, she continued, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. It's cute, in a way. Everyone has their little battles. Yours is just stationary. My mother kept her head down, pushing a pea around her plate. Nathan looked down at his hands, his jaw tightening. I felt the heat rise up my neck. Not embarrassment. Rage. Cold, hard rage. She was mocking the very shield that protected her. She was laughing at the silence that allowed her to sleep soundly in her $1 million home. She was comparing my battlefield, a digital global chessboard where stakes were measured in nations, to a jammed printer. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the Botox. I saw the insecurity masked by the diamonds. She needed me to be small so Nathan could be big. She needed me to be the failure so she could be the mother of a hero. Stationery can be very dangerous, Aunt Marjorie, I said, my voice dangerously soft. Paper cuts are lethal. She didn't catch the sarcasm. She just nodded, satisfied. Exactly. That's why we need men like Nathan, to handle the real world. She raised her glass again. To Nathan, the only real soldier at this table. Nathan flinched. The glass in his hand trembled slightly. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Don't do it, his look said. Just let it go. But the sound of her laughter was still ringing in my ears. The scar on my shoulder throbbed. The 36 hours of sleepless vigilance weighed on my soul. And then, she said it. The one word she should have never, ever used. Honestly, Marjorie sighed, setting her glass down. It's good you have a safe job, Collins. You're just softer. You're not built for the fight. You're what the boys call a pog, right, Nathan? A person other than grunt. The room went dead silent. POG wasn't just an acronym. In the military, coming from a civilian who had never served a day in her life, it was a slur. It was a dismissal of every sacrifice, every risk, every drop of sweat. Nathan dropped his fork. It hit the china with a violence that made everyone jump. Mom, he warned, his voice dark. What? Marjorie blinked, innocent and cruel. It's true, isn't it? She's a pog, a paper pusher. Why pretend otherwise? That was it. The dam broke. The secretary was gone. Oracle 9 was entering the room, and she wasn't bringing paper clips. She was bringing fire. The word hung in the air, toxic and heavy, POG. For civilians, it's just an acronym. For service members, it's a dividing line. But the way Marjorie said it, with that sneer, that casual wine-drunk arrogance, turned it into a weapon. A POG, she repeated, savoring the taste of it. That's what you are, isn't it, Collins? A paper tiger, someone who wears the costume but never plays the part. She took another sip of her Cabernet, her eyes glassy but focused intently on tearing me down. I have to be honest with you, because I'm family. And family tells the truth. It's embarrassing. I look at your father's picture on the mantle, a real soldier. And then I look at you. He would be ashamed. You're staining his memory by walking around in a uniform you only wear to file tax returns. My blood ran cold. It wasn't the heat of embarrassment anymore. It was the icy chill of absolute clarity. She had crossed the line. She hadn't just insulted me. She had invoked my father to do it. Marjorie, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Stop. Why? She laughed, gesturing with her fork. Because the truth hurts. You think putting on a uniform makes you special? It's just dress up, Collins. You're playing dress up to fool people into thinking you matter. But we know. We know you're just a glorified clerk hiding behind the government's skirt. I turned my head slowly to look at my mother. She was sitting directly across from me, her shoulders hunched as if she were expecting a physical blow. She heard every word. She heard her sister-in-law call her daughter a fraud, a disgrace, a stain on the family name. Mom, I said softly. My mother didn't look up. She busied herself with cutting a piece of turkey that was already cut. She took a sip of water. She did everything except look me in the eye. She did everything except say, "That's enough, Marjorie." The silence from her side of the table was louder than Marjorie's insults. It was a deafening confirmation. I was alone. In this room, in this family, I had no allies. My own mother would trade my dignity for a peaceful dinner and a continued invitation to the beach house. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. The last tether of familial obligation snapped. Wow, I breathed out. Okay. I looked down at my hands. My right hand was gripping the silver dinner knife. I squeezed it. My knuckles turned white. The metal dug into my palm, a grounding pain that kept me from flipping the table. Across from me, the dynamic shifted. Nathan wasn't laughing anymore. The smirk had vanished from his face. He was staring at my hand, at the way I was gripping the knife. He was a SEAL. He had been trained to recognize threat indicators. He knew that a grip like that didn't come from a hurt feeling. It came from a suppressed, lethal instinct. He looked up at my face. I wasn't looking at Marjorie anymore. I was staring at a spot on the wall behind her, my eyes unfocused but intense. My breathing had slowed. My posture had shifted, shoulders squared, chin down. It wasn't the posture of a beaten niece. It was the posture of an operator entering a kill box. Nathan slowly, deliberately, placed his wine glass on the table. Clunk. "Mom," he said. His voice was different now. The playful son was gone. This was the lieutenant commander speaking. "Shut up." Marjorie blinked, stunned. "Excuse me? Nathan, honey, don't be rude. I'm just telling her what she needs to hear for her own good." "I said shut up," Nathan barked. The command cracked like a whip across the dining room table. Marjorie recoiled, her mouth hanging open. My mother finally looked up, her eyes wide with terror. Nathan ignored them both. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, invading my space. He locked eyes with me. He was searching. He was looking past the gray suit, past the Cousin Collins facade, trying to find what he had just glimpsed in my grip on the knife. He saw the scar tissue in my eyes, the kind you don't get from paper cuts. He saw the 1,000-yard stare that I had let slip for just a fraction of a second. "Collins," Nathan said, his voice low, deadly serious. "You're not admin, are you?" I didn't answer. I kept my gaze steady, cold. "I've been watching you all night," Nathan continued, his eyes narrowing. "You cleared the room when you walked in. You checked the exits. You haven't sat with your back to the door once. And that grip?" He nodded at my hand still strangling the knife. "That's not how a clerk holds silverware." "Nathan, what are you talking about?" Marjorie sputtered, trying to regain control. "She's just upset because I called her out." "Quiet!" Nathan slammed his hand on the table, rattling the fine china. He didn't break eye contact with me. "Drop the act, Collins," he said. "It wasn't a request. You're not a pog. You never were. I've seen that look before. I've seen it in guys who come back from places that don't exist on maps." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "Don't lie to me. Not here. Not now." He took a breath, and then he asked the question that would shatter the charade forever. "What is your call sign?" The question hung there. A call sign isn't just a nickname. It's an identity. It's who you are when the world is burning. It's the name that pilots scream over the radio when they need air support. It's the name that enemies whisper in fear. If I answered him, there was no going back. If I answered him, the gray suit, the boring job, the failure of a niece, it all died right here on this table. Marjorie looked confusingly between us. "Call sign? Like Top Gun?" "What is this nonsense?" Nathan ignored her. "Tell me, Collins. I need to know who I'm sitting across from." "Are you my cousin, the secretary, or are you something else?" I slowly unclenched my hand from the knife. The blood rushed back into my white knuckles. I looked at Nathan. I saw a man who thought he was the alpha in the room. I saw a man who thought he knew what power looked like because he wore a trident on his chest. He had no idea. I picked up my napkin and dabbed the corner of my mouth. The movement was slow, deliberate, elegant. "You really want to know, Nathan?" I asked softly. "Yes," he hissed. I lowered the napkin. I looked him dead in the eye, and I let the mask fall completely. Oracle 9. The dining room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the next room. My mother was holding her breath. Marjorie was blinking, a confused smile plastered on her face, waiting for the punchline. Nathan was leaning forward, his blue eyes locked onto mine like laser sights. He was daring me. He was calling my bluff. He expected me to say something administrative, something like Echo Support or Logistics 1. I didn't blink. I didn't break eye contact. I let the silence stretch until it was almost painful. Then, I opened my mouth and spoke the words that had never left a secure facility before. Oracle 9. I said it softly. No drama, no theatrics, just a fact. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, clatter. Nathan's fork hit his plate. It wasn't a drop, it was a spasm. His hand had jerked as if he'd touched a live wire. The color drained from his face so fast it was terrifying. One moment, he was the flushed, arrogant Navy SEAL. The next, he was gray, ash-white, like he'd seen a ghost. He stood up. He didn't just stand, he snapped to attention. His chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor, falling backward with a loud crash. He didn't even look at it. His back was ramrod straight, his chin tucked, his arms pinned to his sides. It was the involuntary, muscle memory reaction of a soldier finding himself in the presence of a god. Marjorie jumped, clutching her pearls. "Nathan, what on earth?" "Oracle 9, Nathan whispered. His voice was trembling. Actual fear. You're the handler for Task Force Black? The Syrian operation?" I picked up my wineglass and took a slow sip. "Sit down, Lieutenant Commander." He didn't sit. He couldn't. He looked like he was about to vomit. I didn't know. I swear to God, Collins, I didn't know. The chatter, the guys talk about Oracle 9 like it's a myth. We thought you were a general. Or a committee. Just me, I said calmly. Just the cousin who files papers. Marjorie looked between us, her face twisting in annoyance. She hated being left out of the joke. She hated not being the center of attention. "Oh, for God's sake," she shrilled, slamming her hand on the table. "What is this? A video game? Oracle 9? What is that? A new anti-aging cream? Stop playing Soldier, Collins. You're scaring your mother." She let out a high, brittle laugh. "Look at him, Nathan. She's got you jumping at shadows. It's probably just her email password." "Shut up, Mom." The scream tore from Nathan's throat. It was primal. It was desperate. Marjorie froze. She had never, in 35 years, heard her son raise his voice at her. Not once. "Nathan," she whimpered. Nathan turned to her, his eyes wild. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Do you have any idea who she is? Do you have any idea what you've been mocking all night?" She's Collins," Marjorie stammered. "She's a secretary." "She is the highest-level intelligence asset in this hemisphere," Nathan roared. "She holds clearance levels that don't even have names. Mom, listen to me. Oracle 9 authorizes kill-capture missions. She directs drone strikes. She moves whole carrier groups like chess pieces." He looked back at me, sweat beading on his forehead. "My commanding officer, my captain, needs an appointment just to speak to her staff. And you. You called her a pog." Nathan let out a hysterical, terrified laugh. "You called Oracle 9 a pog. She could strip me of my rank with a phone call. She could have you investigated by the FBI by dessert. She could erase us." Marjorie paled. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. She saw the gray suit. She saw the plain face. But now, stripped of her delusions, she saw the steel underneath. Is that true?" she whispered. I didn't answer her immediately. I slowly folded my napkin and placed it next to my plate. I smoothed out a wrinkle in the tablecloth. "Answering phones," I said thoughtfully, echoing her words from earlier. "That's what you suggested, right? Maybe Nathan could get me a job answering phones." Marjorie flinched. "I don't answer phones, Aunt Marjorie," I said, my voice cool and even. "I make them ring. And when I make them ring, presidents answer." I stood up. The movement was fluid, graceful. I walked around the table to where Nathan was still standing at attention. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floorboards. At ease, Nathan, I said quietly. He let out a breath he'd been holding for a minute, his shoulders sagging, but he didn't dare look me in the eye. I turned to Marjorie. She was shrinking in her chair, looking smaller and older than I had ever seen her. The Grand Matriarch of Arlington had been reduced to a trembling old woman in a fancy dress. I kept my mouth shut for 18 years, I told her. Not because I was ashamed, but because my work requires silence. Because the safety of this family, and this country, depends on people like me staying in the shadows while people like Nathan get the parades. I gestured to Nathan's ribbon rack. He earned those. He's a good soldier. He kicks down doors. But I tell him which doors to kick. And I make sure there isn't a bomb waiting on the other side. I leaned in close to her, resting my hands on the back of her chair. She smelled of fear now, overriding the expensive perfume. Operational security, OPSEC, is more important than your ego, Marjorie. It's more important than your need to brag at the country club. I tolerate your insults because I am disciplined. But tonight, you insulted my father. And you insulted the uniform. I straightened up and buttoned my gray blazer. I'm leaving now. The turkey was dry, by the way. I looked at my mother. She was weeping silently, tears streaming down her face. But for the first time, she was looking at me. And in her eyes, there wasn't pity. There was awe. Mom, I said, you can stay if you want, but I'm going home. I turned on my heel and walked toward the foyer. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor, a steady, rhythmic sound. Click, click, click. Behind me, the dining room was a tomb. No one moved, no one spoke. The only sound was the crash of Marjorie's wine glass as her shaking hand finally knocked it over, spilling red wine across the pristine white tablecloth like blood. I didn't look back. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the night. The air was cold, biting. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that didn't smell of hypocrisy and lies. I walked to my beat-up Ford Taurus. It looked the same as it had an hour ago, dusty, old, unremarkable. But as I unlocked the door, it felt different. It felt like a chariot. I sat in the driver's seat and checked my phone. One missed call, secured line. I dialed back. This is Oracle, I said. Go ahead. The voice on the other end was clipped, urgent. Ma'am, we have a situation in Kabul. Task Force Alpha is requesting your authorization for extraction. I'm on my way, I said. ETA 20 minutes. I started the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness of the suburban street. I pulled out of the driveway, leaving the mansion and the metals behind. I had a job to do. A real job. Answering phones, I repeated, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. That's what you suggested, right? Maybe Nathan could get me a job answering phones. Marjorie flinched. The color that had drained from her face was slowly returning, but it wasn't the healthy flush of embarrassment. It was the blotchy, uneven red of a narcissist who had been cornered. But why didn't you say anything? She stammered, her voice pitching up into a whine. She looked around the room, desperate for an ally, but found none. Collins, how could I have known? You never talk about your work. You come here in those drab clothes, driving that terrible car. I just wanted to help you. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Help me? Is that what you call it? Yes, she insisted, clutching her pearls as if they were a lifeline. I pushed you because I care. I wanted you to have ambition, Collins. I didn't want you to waste your life. I only wanted what was best for you. Stop, I said. The single word cut through her hysterics like a blade. I took a step closer to her. She shrank back into her chair, pressing herself against the expensive upholstery. You didn't want what was best for me, Marjorie, I said, my voice steady and cold. You wanted what was best for your ego. You needed a failure. You needed someone to point at and say, look at her, look how sad and small she is, so that Nathan would look even bigger by comparison. I gestured to Nathan, who was still standing, looking like his entire world had just tilted on its axis. Nathan is the star, I continued. He's the hero. He's the golden boy. But a star doesn't shine as bright without a dark background. That's what I was to you, wasn't I? I was the dark background. I was the prop you used to make your sun shine brighter. Marjorie opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. The truth was too blatant, too naked. I never, she whispered weakly. You did, Nathan said. His voice was hoarse. He was looking at his mother, but the admiration that usually filled his eyes was gone. In its place was something colder, something like disgust. She's right, Mom, Nathan said, shaking his head slowly. God, she's right. You always told me she was lazy. You told me she washed out of real training. You told me she was just a clerk. He looked down at his hands, hands that had held weapons, hands that had saved lives. And then he looked back at his mother. You made me arrogant. You made me believe I was better than her just because I wear a uniform everyone recognizes. But I'm not better. I'm just louder. Nathan, Marjorie gasped, tears welling up in her eyes, tears of self-pity, not remorse. How can you say that? I'm your mother. I did everything for you. You lied to me, Nathan said simply. You looked at a woman who serves at the highest level of national security, and you called her a pog because it made you feel important. He turned away from her, unable to look at her face anymore. The idol had fallen. The pedestal had shattered. I watched the realization wash over Marjorie. She had lost. She had lost the game she had been playing for 18 years. She had lost the narrative, and worst of all, she was losing the adoration of her son. For a narcissist, that is a fate worse than death. She turned her gaze back to me. The fear in her eyes was replaced by a sudden, vicious hatred. If she couldn't control me, she would try to destroy me one last time. So you think you're better than us now? She spat, her voice trembling with rage. Just because you have some secret clearance? Just because you have a fancy code name? You're still just Collins. You're still the girl with no husband, no children, no life. You're cold. You're empty. I am disciplined, I corrected her. I looked at her with a clarity that felt liberating. 18 years, Marjorie. For 18 years, I sat at this table and ate your dry turkey and swallowed your insults. I didn't do it because I was weak. I didn't do it because I was afraid of you. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper that forced her to lean in to hear. I did it because I was trained. I was trained to keep secrets that would make your hair turn white. I was trained to put the mission above my personal feelings. My oath to the Constitution is more important than my pride. That is the difference between us. You need applause to feel valuable. I don't. I straightened up, smoothing my blazer. But tonight you crossed the red line. You didn't just insult me. You insulted my father, and you tried to use his memory to shame me. I shook my head. You don't get to speak his name, not anymore. Marjorie was shaking. Her face was a mask of ugly, twisted fury. She couldn't handle the truth. She couldn't handle the mirror I was holding up to her soul. Get out, she screamed. It was a shrill, piercing sound that cracked the tension in the room. Get out of my house, you ungrateful, miserable girl. Get out. She was pointing at the door, her hand trembling violently. She was trying to reclaim her territory. She was trying to have the last word. I didn't flinch. I didn't yell back. I simply nodded. Gladly, I said. I looked at my mother one last time. She was still sitting there, silent, tears streaming down her face. But she gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. It wasn't enough to make up for years of silence, but it was a start. Goodbye, Mom, I said softly. I turned on my heel and walked toward the foyer. I didn't rush. I walked with the measured pace of a woman who knows exactly where she is going. Don't come back, Marjorie shrieked behind me. Don't you dare come back here expecting Christmas dinner. You're dead to me. Her words bounced harmlessly off my back. They were just noise, static. I reached the heavy oak door and pulled it open. The air outside hit me like a physical blow, cold, crisp, and clean. It smelled of winter and dead leaves, but to me, it smelled like freedom. It smelled like the end of a very long, very dark chapter. I stepped out onto the porch and let the door close behind me. Thud. The sound was final. It was the sound of a bridge burning, and the warmth of the flames felt incredible. I walked down the driveway toward my car. The wind bit at my cheeks, but I didn't button my coat. I wanted to feel it. I wanted to feel everything. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the niece who wasn't good enough. I wasn't the cousin who lived in the shadow. I was Collins Flynn. I was Oracle 9. And I was free. If you have ever had to walk away from a family member to save your own sanity, hit that like button. It's the hardest thing to do, but sometimes it's the only way to survive. Leave a comment saying, "I chose peace," if you agree that boundaries are necessary. I reached my car and put my hand on the door handle. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A secure line. I pulled it out. The screen glowed in the darkness. "This is Oracle," I answered. "Ma'am?" The voice on the other end was clipped, urgent. "We have a situation developing in Sector 4. Task Force Alpha is requesting authorization for immediate extraction." I looked back at the house one last time. Through the window, I could see Marjorie still gesturing wildly, shouting at an empty room. I saw Nathan sitting with his head in his hands. I turned my back on them. "I'm on my way," I said into the phone. "ETA 20 minutes. I got into the car, started the engine, and drove away. The rearview mirror was dark, but the road ahead was illuminated by my headlights, bright and clear. The Pentagon at 2 a.m. is a different world. The tourists are gone. The massive parking lots are empty except for the scattered cars of the watch officers and crisis response teams. The corridors, usually buzzing with the noise of thousands of bureaucrats, are silent, stretching out like endless linoleum arteries. But deep inside the E-ring, inside the NMCC, the National Military Command Center, the pulse never stops. I walked through the double doors, flashing my badge. The Marine Guard didn't just check it, he recognized me. He straightened up, giving a sharp nod. "Ma'am." "Status?" I asked, not breaking stride. "Situation Room B. They're waiting for you, Oracle." I entered the room. It was a hive of controlled chaos. A dozen analysts were hunched over computer terminals, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of screens. On the main wall, a massive digital map of Kabul, Afghanistan, was displayed in high definition. "Officer on deck," someone barked. The room didn't snap to attention. We don't do that in crisis mode, but the energy shifted. Heads turned, eyes focused. The uncertainty that had been filling the room evaporated the moment I walked in. I wasn't Collins the poor relation anymore. I wasn't the niece who wore boring clothes. Here, in this windowless room filled with secrets, I was the apex predator. "Talk to me," I commanded, tossing my coat onto a chair and rolling up the sleeves of my gray blazer. Major Vance, a seasoned intelligence officer with bags under his eyes, stepped forward. "We have a problem, Oracle. Asset Echo 4 has been compromised. His cover was blown 20 minutes ago. He's holed up in a safe house in District 9, but he's got hostiles closing in. 3 technicals, maybe 15 dismounts." I looked at the screen. A live drone feed showed the thermal signatures, white-hot ghosts moving through the dark streets of Kabul. I saw the safe house. I saw the enemy trucks circling like sharks. Echo 4 wasn't just an asset, he was a father of 2 from Ohio, who had been deep undercover for 6 months, gathering intel on a terror cell. He was one of ours. "What's the status of the QRF?" I asked. "Quick Reaction Force." "Alpha Team is 5 minutes out," Vance said, pointing to a cluster of blue dots on the map. "But the rules of engagement are tricky. We've got civilians in the area." I zoomed in on the feed. My eyes narrowed. There, right next to the compound wall, were 3 small heat signatures. They were too small to be fighters. "Kids," I whispered, "playing soccer in the street. If we engage with hellfires from the drone, we wipe them out," Vance said grimly. "If we wait for Alpha to get there on foot, Echo 4 gets overrun." The room went silent. Everyone looked at me. This was the burden. This was the job. Marjorie thought I made coffee. In reality, I made life-or-death decisions in the blink of an eye. I could feel the ghost of my father standing beside me. "Do the hard thing," he would say. "Do the right thing." "We don't trade innocent lives," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the servers. "Cancel the airstrike. Tell Alpha to dismount 2 blocks east and flank them. We go in quiet. We use the sniper teams to clear a path. That increases the risk to our team, a colonel from the Air Force objected. It'll take longer. I know, I said, turning to face him. But Alpha is the best. They can handle it. I'm not killing 3 kids to save a schedule. I picked up the headset. Alpha 1, this is Oracle. You are green to engage. Close quarters only. Watch your crossfire. Get our boy home. Solid copy, Oracle. The voice of the team leader crackled in my ear. Moving now. For the next 12 minutes, I didn't breathe. I watched the blue dots merge with the white dots. I watched the muzzle flashes bloom like tiny silent flowers on the screen. I listened to the terse, professional communication of men doing violence on my behalf. Sniper 1, target down. Breaching, clear. We have the package. Echo 4 is secure. A collective sigh went through the room, but I didn't relax. Not yet. The kids? I asked. Alpha 1 here, the voice came back. We pushed them back into the alley before we engaged. They're scared, but they're safe. No collateral damage. I closed my eyes for a second. The tension in my shoulders released. We did it. We saved the asset, and we kept our souls. Good effect on target, I said into the mic. Bring them home. Oracle out. I took off the headset and placed it on the console. My hand was steady. The room broke into quiet activity, analysts typing reports, officers making calls. But there was a new lightness in the air. That was a good call, Collins, a deep voice said behind me. I turned around. It was Colonel Soto, my direct superior. A hard man who rarely handed out compliments. You took a risk diverting the airstrike, he said, looking at the map. But you were right. If we'd hit those kids, the political fallout would have been a nightmare. And it was the right thing to do. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a manila folder. He tapped it against his palm. I was going to wait until Monday, he said. But after tonight, and honestly, after the last 18 years of watching you work, it seems appropriate now. He handed me the folder. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with the Department of Defense seal at the top. It was an order of promotion. Congratulations, Soto said, extending his hand. Colonel Flynn. I stared at the paper. Colonel. Full bird colonel. It was a rank that commanded respect instantly. It was a rank that my father had never reached. The board was unanimous, Soto continued. They know who runs the show down here. You've been doing the job for years, Collins. It's time you wore the rank. I felt a lump in my throat, not of sadness, but of overwhelming pride. This wasn't a participation trophy. This wasn't a medal given because I was someone's son. I had earned this. Every late night, every missed holiday, every hard decision had led to this moment. Thank you, sir, I said, shaking his hand. My grip was firm. Go home, Colonel, Soto said with a rare smile. Get some sleep. You look like hell. I feel great, sir, I lied. I walked out of the Situation Room, clutching the folder to my chest. The corridors of the Pentagon were still empty, but they didn't feel lonely anymore. They felt like my kingdom. I walked past a mirror in the hallway and stopped. I looked at my reflection. The gray suit was rumpled. My hair was coming loose from its bun. My eyes were shadowed with fatigue. But I didn't see the failure Marjorie saw. I didn't see the pog Nathan mocked. I saw a colonel. I saw a warrior. I saw Oracle 9. I thought about the dinner earlier that evening. I thought about the expensive wine and the empty bragging. It all seemed so small now, so insignificant. Marjorie could keep her country club. She could keep her mansion. I had this. I had the knowledge that tonight, because of me, a father was going home to his children in Ohio. Because of me, 3 Afghan kids would grow up to see another sunrise. That was my medal. And it was worth more than all the gold in Arlington. I walked out into the massive parking lot, the cold air biting at my face again. I got into my Ford Taurus and placed the folder on the passenger seat. I looked at it one more time, smiling. Happy Thanksgiving, Dad, I whispered to the empty car. I started the engine and drove home. The sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. A new day was breaking. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to meet it. Silence is a weapon. In the intelligence community, we call it radio silence. It's a tactical choice to deny the enemy information, to confuse them, to make them sweat. But in a family, silence is something else entirely. It's a shield. For 18 months, I wielded that shield against Marjorie. She didn't take the hint immediately. Narcissists never do. They view silence not as a boundary, but as a malfunction in their control panel. They poke, they prod, they try to reboot the relationship on their terms. First came the texts. December 1st. Collins, dear. I'm willing to overlook your outburst at Thanksgiving. I know you were stressed. Let's start fresh. Christmas dinner is at 4 p.m. I read it. I didn't reply. December 15th. I bought that expensive ham you like. Nathan is coming. Don't be stubborn. Family is family. I archived the message. December 24th. Your mother is crying because you won't answer. Do you want to be responsible for ruining her Christmas? That was the hook, using my mother as bait. It was a classic manipulation tactic. In the past, I would have caved. I would have driven over there, apologized for things I didn't do, and eaten the dry turkey just to keep the peace. But I wasn't that person anymore. I looked at my phone, at the stream of blue bubbles demanding my attention, my energy, my submission. And then, with a calm thumb, I pressed block contact. The relief was physical. It felt like taking off a tight pair of shoes after a long march. My mother called me the next day, her voice trembling. Collins, please, just answer her. Be the bigger person. You know how she is. 9 times out of 10, she means well. No, Mom, I said, sitting in my quiet apartment with a glass of good wine and a book. She doesn't mean well. She means control. And I'm not drinking the poison anymore just because you're thirsty for peace. But she's your aunt, my mother pleaded. And I'm a colonel, I said softly. I don't negotiate with terrorists, Mom. And I don't negotiate with family members who treat me like garbage. My mother went silent. She didn't understand. She belonged to a generation that believed blood was thicker than self-respect. But I knew better. Blood is just biology. Respect is a choice. The real test came 6 months later. The promotion ceremony was held in the Hall of Heroes at the Pentagon. It's a hallowed space, the walls lined with the names of Medal of Honor recipients. The air smells of history and floor wax. I stood on the stage wearing my dress blues. They fit perfectly. The fabric was crisp, the ribbons on my chest straight and colorful. Not stolen valor, but earned valor. General Soto stood in front of me. Order to attention, he barked. The room snapped. My mother was there in the front row. She looked small in her beige cardigan, clutching a tissue. She was crying, of course, but for the first time, her tears didn't make me feel guilty. They made me feel seen. And next to her was Nathan. He wasn't wearing his dress blues. He was in his service khakis, respectful, understated. He wasn't there to outshine me. He was there to witness me. When General Soto called for family members to pin on the new rank, my mother stepped up with shaking hands to pin the eagle on my left shoulder. She fumbled with the clasp, her fingers nervous. I've got it, Mom, I whispered, smiling at her. I'm so proud, she sobbed. Your father. Oh, Collins, your father would be so proud. Then Nathan stepped up to my right side. He took the silver eagle from the velvet box. His hands were steady. He looked me in the eye, and the look he gave me was one of profound, soldierly respect. It was the look you give to someone who has walked through fire and come out the other side. Colonel, he said softly as he pinned the eagle to my shoulder. Lieutenant Commander, I nodded. After the ceremony, during the reception, Nathan pulled me aside near the punch bowl. He looked older than he had at Thanksgiving. The arrogance that used to coat him like a second skin was gone, replaced by a quiet humility. She wanted to come, Nathan said, looking down at his cup. I didn't need to ask who she was. She threw a fit when I told her she wasn't on the list. He continued. She bought a new dress. She was going to tell everyone how she always knew you were special. She wanted to be the aunt of the colonel. I took a sip of punch. And I told her no. Nathan said. He looked up at me. I told her she lost that privilege the night she called you a pog. I told her that you don't get to celebrate the victory if you weren't there for the fight. I felt a tightness in my chest loosen. Thank you, Nathan. He shrugged, a shadow passing over his face. I should have done it years ago, Collins. I'm sorry I let her use me to hurt you. I didn't see it until you showed me. You see it now, I said. That's what matters. But Marjorie wasn't done. If she couldn't be there in person, she would force her presence into the room another way. 2 hours later, back in my new office, a corner office with a view of the Potomac, my assistant, Captain Lewis, walked in carrying a massive floral arrangement. It was ostentatious. Orchids, lilies, roses. It looked like a funeral spray for a billionaire. Delivery for you, ma'am, Lewis said, struggling to see over the blooms. No return address, but there's a card. I plucked the card from the plastic fork. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was loopy, decorative, and aggressive. To my dearest niece, Colonel Flynn. Congratulations on finally making something of yourself. I always told everyone you were a late bloomer. Let's do lunch. Love, Aunt Marjorie. I stared at the card. It was a masterclass in passive aggression. Finally making something of yourself. Even in congratulating me, she had to insult me. She had to remind me that I was a late bloomer, implying that up until now, I had been a weed. And the flowers, they were too big, too loud. They were meant to scream, "Look at me, look at what a generous aunt I am," to anyone who walked into my office. She wanted to use my success as fuel for her own ego. She wanted narcissistic supply, the validation she craved like oxygen. Captain Lewis, I said calmly. Yes, Colonel. Take these back to the mailroom, I said, dropping the card into the shredder. Whirr! The loops and swirls of her handwriting turned into confetti. Ma'am? Lewis looked confused. They're really nice flowers. They're not flowers, Captain. They're a Trojan horse, I said, turning back to my computer. Send them back to the sender. Do not open the plastic. And mark the package. Refused by addressee. Copy that, ma'am. Lewis didn't ask questions. He picked up the monstrosity and marched out. I watched him go. I felt a profound sense of peace. In the past, I would have kept the flowers. I would have felt obligated to write a thank you note. I would have let her buy her way back into my life with a few $100s of petals. But not today. I was Oracle 9. I decided who had access to my life. And Marjorie? Her clearance had been permanently revoked. If you've ever had to block a toxic family member to find your own peace, leave a comment below. It's not spite, it's self-preservation. I turned to look out the window at the river. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over DC. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at it, expecting a briefing update. It was Nathan. The message was short. No emojis, no fluff. Call me when you can. It's Mom. It's bad. The peace I had just found shattered like glass. The radio silence had been broken, not by manipulation, but by mortality. Walter Reed National Military Medical Center is a place of contradictions. It is sterile, yet heavy with emotion. It is where heroes come to heal, and sometimes where they come to die. But Marjorie wasn't a hero. She was a dependent. And now she was a patient in the oncology ward. I walked down the hallway, the squeak of my sneakers on the linoleum floor echoing in the silence. I wasn't wearing my uniform. I wasn't Colonel Flynn. I wasn't Oracle 9. I was just Collins, wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater, carrying a cup of bad cafeteria coffee. When Nathan had called me at 3:04 a.m., his voice cracking, saying, "It's pancreatic, stage 4. All the anger I'd held onto for 18 months. It didn't disappear, but it lost its weight. Hate is heavy. It takes energy to maintain. And facing the finality of death, hate seemed like a waste of calories. I pushed open the door to room 402. The woman in the bed was a stranger. The Marjorie I knew was a force of nature, loud, vibrant, painted in layers of makeup and arrogance. This woman was small. She was gray. Her hair, usually dyed a fierce blonde and sprayed into submission, was gone, replaced by a thin, patchy fuzz. Her skin hung loosely on her bones. Nathan was sitting by the window, staring out at the parking lot. He looked exhausted. When I entered, he stood up, relief washing over his face. "You came," he whispered. "Of course I came," I said. Marjorie stirred. Her eyes opened slowly. They were yellowed, sunken, but they were still hers. She focused on me, blinking as if trying to clear a fog. "Collins." Her voice was a rasp, a dry leaf scraping against concrete. "I'm here, Aunt Marjorie," I said, stepping closer to the bed. She tried to lift her hand, but it was too heavy. I reached out and took it. Her skin felt like parchment paper, dry, fragile, cold. You look different," she wheezed. "I'm just wearing civilian clothes," I said softly. "No," she shook her head slightly. "You look strong." A tear leaked from the corner of her eye and tracked a path through the map of wrinkles on her cheek. "I always hated that about you. Even when you were little, you were so quiet, so self-contained. You didn't need anyone." I pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. This was it. The unmasking. The drugs and the proximity to death had stripped away the narcissism, leaving only the raw, ugly truth underneath. "Why did you hate me, Marjorie?" I asked. It wasn't an accusation, it was a genuine question. She closed her eyes. "Because you reminded me of him. Your father." She took a ragged breath. "Everyone loved him. He was the hero. He was the brave one. And I was just the sister who married money. I was just the one who threw parties." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "And then you came along. And you were just like him." And I looked at Nathan, my sweet, soft boy, and I was terrified. Terrified of what? That you would be better than him, she confessed, her voice breaking. That you would eclipse him. And if you, the quiet, boring cousin, were better than my son, then what did that make me? A failure. A mother who couldn't raise a winner. I looked at Nathan. He was weeping silently by the window, his back turned to us. He was hearing his mother admit that her love for him had been conditional, based on him being better than someone else. "So I tried to make you small," Marjorie whispered. "I thought if I pushed you down, if I made you feel worthless, you wouldn't shine so bright. And Nathan would look taller." She opened her eyes and looked at me, pleading. "I was jealous, Collins. I was so jealous of your strength. I was jealous that you didn't need the applause." The room was silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Beep. 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 I looked at this dying woman. I looked at the ruin of her vanity. And I felt nothing. No anger, no triumph, just a profound, aching pity. She had spent her entire life building a fortress of lies to protect a fragile ego. And now, at the end, she was alone in the rubble. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Collins. Can you ever forgive me?" This was the moment. The power dynamic had shifted completely. She was begging for absolution. I held the keys to her peace. I could have said no. I could have walked out. I could have let her die with the weight of her guilt. It would have been justified. But I remembered the words of a chaplain I met in Kandahar. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. I looked at the burn scars on my soul. I was tired of carrying them. "I forgive you, Marjorie," I said. Her body sagged with relief. You do?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Not because what you did was right. It wasn't. You hurt me. You hurt Nathan. You hurt my mother." I paused, smoothing the blanket over her hand. "I forgive you because I refuse to carry your poison for another day." I forgive you because I want peace more than I want revenge. Marjorie closed her eyes, tears flowing freely now. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. She drifted into sleep shortly after that, the morphine pulling her under. I sat there for another hour, watching her chest rise and fall. Nathan walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. You're a better person than I am, he said hoarsely. I don't know if I could have done that. It wasn't for her, Nathan, I said, standing up. It was for me. Marjorie died 4 days later. The funeral was exactly what she would have wanted. It was held at a large Episcopal church in Arlington. There were lilies everywhere, thousands of dollars worth of flowers. The pews were packed with her country club friends, women in black designer dresses, and men in expensive suits. They stood up and gave eulogies about her generosity, her style, her zest for life. They talked about the parties she threw. They talked about her charity galas. I sat in the front row, dry-eyed. I listened to the lies. They were beautiful lies, polite lies, the kind we tell at funerals to smooth over the rough edges of a life. But I knew the truth. Nathan knew the truth. As they lowered the casket into the ground, I looked up at the sky. It was a brilliant, piercing blue, not a cloud in sight. I thought about my father's funeral. Simple, quiet, honorable. I thought about Marjorie's funeral. Loud, expensive, hollow. I realized then that legacy isn't what you leave in your bank account. It isn't the size of your headstone. Legacy is the truth you leave behind in the hearts of the people who knew you. Marjorie left behind a legacy of insecurity and noise. My father left behind a legacy of service and silence. I knew which one I chose. I walked over to the open grave and dropped a single white rose onto the casket. Goodbye, Aunt Marjorie, I whispered. Rest in peace. The competition is over. I turned around and walked away, across the manicured grass of the cemetery. Nathan fell into step beside me. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We walked out of the cemetery gates and onto the sidewalk. The city was bustling around us. Life was moving on. What now? Nathan asked, looking at me. He looked lost, like a child who had just realized the map he was given was wrong. Now. I smiled, inhaling the fresh air. Now we live, on our own terms. I checked my watch. I have a briefing at 1400 hours. The world keeps turning. Go get him, Oracle, Nathan said, a genuine smile touching his lips for the first time in weeks. I got into my car and drove toward D.C. The Washington Monument pierced the skyline in the distance, white and stark against the blue. I felt lighter than I had in 20 years. The ghost was gone. The shadow was lifted. I was ready for the future. 15 years is a long time. It's long enough for a child to grow up, for a war to end, and for a ghost to become a legend. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my Arlington apartment. The face looking back at me was older. There were lines around my eyes, crow's feet etched by years of squinting at satellite imagery and reading intelligence reports in low light. My hair, once a nondescript brown, was now streaked with iron gray. Marjorie would have been horrified. She would have dragged me to a salon to cover it up, to hide the evidence of time. But I earned every single gray hair. I wore them like ribbons. I adjusted the collar of my uniform. It wasn't the gray suit anymore. It was the Army service uniform, the dress blues. And on the shoulder, gleaming under the recessed lighting, was a single, silver star. Brigadier General. It still felt surreal to say it out loud. General Flynn. My father never made it past Major. He was a good soldier, but he didn't play the political game. I didn't play the game either. I rewrote the rules. I picked up my cover, the hat with the gold braid, and placed it squarely on my head. I looked at myself one last time. I didn't see a lonely spinster. I didn't see a pog. I saw a woman who had built an empire out of silence. Time to go, General, I whispered to the empty room. The drive to West Point took 3 hours. The Hudson River Valley was ablaze with autumn colors, red, gold, orange, mirroring the ribbons on my chest. When I arrived at the academy, the air was crisp and electric. Cadets in their distinctive gray uniforms moved with purposeful strides. This was the factory where the Army forged its leaders. I walked into the auditorium. 2,000 cadets stood up as one. The sound of their chairs snapping back and their boots hitting the floor was like a thunderclap. Attention! I walked to the podium. I looked out at the sea of young faces. They were so young. Some of them looked terrified. Some looked arrogant. I saw myself in the back row 25 years ago, scared, determined, trying to prove I belonged. Be seated, I commanded. The thunder rolled again as they sat. I didn't open with a joke. I didn't open with a war story about explosions and gunfire. Most of you want to be heroes, I began, my voice amplified by the microphone, steady and clear. You want the ticker tape parade. You want the CNN interview. You want your neighbors to look at you with awe. I paused, letting the words sink in. If that is why you are here, leave now. A ripple of unease went through the room. The greatest service you will ever render to this republic will not be on the front page of the New York Times, I continued. It will be in a windowless room at 3 a.m. It will be a decision you make that saves 1,000 lives, but no one will ever know your name. It will be the silence you keep when your family asks what you do and you tell them you push paper because the truth is too heavy for them to carry. I looked directly at a young man in the front row who reminded me of Nathan, handsome, eager. We are not the sword that strikes in the daylight, I said. We are the shield that guards the night. We are the architects of the invisible, and our reward is not applause. Our reward is the sunrise. Our reward is knowing that because of us, a family in Ohio is eating dinner in peace, completely unaware of the monsters we kept from their door. I spoke for 20 minutes. I told them about the burden of secrets. I told them about the strength it takes to be misunderstood. I told them that character is what you do when the lights are off. When I finished, the applause was deafening. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar of respect. As I was leaving the stage, a young female cadet approached me. She was small, with fierce eyes, standing rigidly at attention. Ma'am, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Cadet Martinez. At ease, Martinez, I said. What's on your mind? She hesitated, then blurted out, How do you handle the doubt, ma'am? My family thinks I'm crazy for being here. They say I should have been a nurse or a teacher. They say I'm too small for this fight. I smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a heavy metal coin. It was my personal challenge coin. On one side was the general's star. On the other was a single eye, the symbol of oracle. And the Latin phrase, Silentium est potentia. Silence is power. I took her hand and pressed the coin into her palm. They look at you and see what you lack, I told her, my voice low and intense. They see your size, they see your gender. But they don't see your fire. I closed her fingers around the coin. Don't waste your breath trying to explain your fire to people who only understand smoke. Let them doubt you. Let them underestimate you. It gives you the advantage. I leaned in closer. Don't prove them wrong with words, Martinez. Let the enemy tremble when they hear your name. That is the only proof you need. The cadet looked at the coin, then up at me. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. Thank you, General. Carry on, cadet. I walked out of the auditorium and into the sunlight. The air felt lighter here. The weight of the past, the weight of Marjorie's judgment, of Nathan's shadow, was gone. I had passed the torch. I drove back to D.C. as the sun began to set. When I got home, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my secure email. I poured a glass of Pinot Noir, a good bottle, 2018, and walked out onto my balcony. The Potomac River flowed silently below, reflecting the city lights. My phone buzzed on the railing. It was a text from Nathan. Happy birthday, General. Attached was a photo. It was Nathan, looking tan and happy, wearing a flannel shirt and muddy boots. He was standing next to a beautiful brown horse, his arm around a smiling woman, his wife, and holding a little boy who was laughing at the camera. He wasn't a seal anymore. He wasn't the golden boy trying to win his mother's love. He was a rancher in Montana. He was a husband. He was a father. He had found his own peace, far away from the expectations of Arlington. I typed back, "Thanks, Nate. The horse looks better than you." He replied instantly with a laughing emoji. "Miss you, sis. Come visit." The kid needs to learn how to salute. I smiled. A real smile. I looked out at the city. For 40 years, I had defined myself by who I wasn't. I wasn't the son. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't the hero. But standing there, under the stars, with a glass of wine in my hand and a star on my shoulder, I finally knew who I was. I was the girl who survived the silence. I was the woman who turned invisibility into invincibility. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like victory. "I am Collins Flynn," I whispered to the night. "I am Oracle 9. And for the first time in my life, I was free. My war with the past is finally over. But I know many of you are still fighting in the trenches. You might not have a star on your shoulder, but if you wake up every day and choose dignity over toxicity, you are a hero in my book." If my story gave you the strength to draw your own red line, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. We are building a community of silent warriors right here. And do me one last favor. Go to the comments and write, "I am my own hero." Let's fill the world with that truth. Oracle out.